In this lesson, you will be able to identify the stages of the teaching cycle, construct an essay about the importance of the teaching cycle in teaching and learning process, appreciate the usefulness of teaching cycle in teaching and learning process. I have here a picture or an illustration. What do you observe? What can you say about this picture or illustration? The illustration is about the teaching cycle. So what is teaching cycle? Teaching cycle is a continuously repeating process of assessing student needs, planning instruction, delivering instruction, assessing outcomes, and then determining students' need again. As future teachers, you need to know and understand well the teaching cycle for you to be guided in teaching your class. Do you believe that the work of a teacher does not start and end in teaching per se? The teaching process is not a linear activity that starts with planning and ends with testing. Instead, it is a cycle of repeating stages until the students acquire an understanding of the targeted concepts and skills. There are many models of the teaching cycle that various educators have developed over the years. However, all models boil down to 6 common stages. First is to identify objectives. Second, plan instruction. Third, implement plan. Fourth, check of understanding. Fifth, reflect on teaching. And sixth, assess learning and reflect on results. Now, let us describe each stage of the teaching cycle. The first stage of teaching cycle is to identify objectives. So you will ask this question: what knowledge and or skills do the students need to learn? So as a teacher, you must be guided by the content standards, performance standards, and the learning competencies that are found in the curriculum guide. Of course, teachers must set learning objectives in his or her lesson because learning objectives will serve as our guide in what we want our learners to achieve at the end of the lesson. For example, Teacher Chris identified multiplication of whole numbers up to 2 digits as the goal of her next lesson. In this example, the objective of Teacher Chris is clearly stated, which means she has a goal that she wanted to achieve. After identifying your objectives, you will proceed to the next stage, which is to plan instruction. Teachers should have a plan before going to the battlefield. How can a teacher teach the class smoothly and have a productive learning if the teacher is not organized, right? So in this stage, you will answer the question: what strategies must be implemented for the students to achieve your targeted objectives? In planning instruction, it is important that you have mastered the content of the lesson that you are about to teach. You are the source of knowledge of your learners, so you must master well your lesson. How can you teach well and how can your learners easily understand well the lesson if you yourself is not mastered about the content of your lesson? Just imagine what will happen if that will be the case. Remember that a teacher should be fully equipped before going to the battlefield. Teachers are molding the young children. most especially elementary learners, wherein this level of their life serves as the foundation of their learnings in the future. It is also beneficial to be familiar with your students. You as a teacher must be familiar with what they know and how your student learn. I can say that there is no best instruction that we can use in teaching and learning process. Instead, we must use the instruction that suits to our learners. Therefore, as a teachers, we must know well our learners for us to cater all their needs. For example, Teacher Chris thought it is best to apply constructivist approach. She planned a lesson which incorporates the problem-solving strategy. After planning instruction, it's time to implement what you have planned. This is the time you will perform or act what you have planned. This is the stage where you conduct the learning activities that you have prepared during the planning stage. A word of advice: even though you have carefully and delicately planned for the lesson, you must be flexible with the possible changes that you need to accommodate. Remember that there are a lot of possible things that will happen inside the class. So, as a teacher, we must be flexible for us to handle our class well. Example: the class went on smoothly. The activities that Teacher Chris prepared were successfully done by her students. Check for understanding is the next stage after implementing instruction. Teaching is about helping students learn. During the implementation of the lesson plan, you must every now and then check whether the students have understood what you have covered so far. You will know if your students understand the lesson through their facial reactions and verbal concept or skill. If they didn't understand the lesson, then you might need to give a more elaborate explanation, more examples, or whatever you think is needed based on students' reaction. In this stage, you can also make use of formative assessment. For example, to make sure that her students understood the lesson, Teacher Chris gave a 3-item exercise as an exit pass. After checking the understanding of your students, it's time to reflect on your teaching. You must evaluate every teaching period that you finished by asking these questions. Were the objectives achieved? Were the implemented strategies effective? How can instruction be improved? Your answers to the last questions will give you an insight in how to improve instruction the next time you teach the same lesson. However, if your answer in the first question is no, the objectives were not met, then you need to plan again. For example, based on the exit pass, Teacher Chris found out that many of the students have difficulty multiplying numbers that involve the digit 8. So, she decided to do a find your error activity the next day for the students to realize their mistakes. She also planned to give a short drill on skip counting by 8. To complete the stages of teaching cycle, you need to assess learning and reflect on the results. This stage gives you a concrete measure of what the students have learned. In math, this is usually through a paper and pen examination. Take note that this stage does not end in assessing learning. You need to reflect on the results. After the teacher knows the result of the assessment of the learners, it's time for the teacher to reflect into his or her teaching. In this part, if the learners got lower score from the assessment, then the teacher should reflect what is the problem behind, for him or her to find a solution to that problem, so that in the next lesson, the teacher can now cater the needs of that particular learner. Also, through reflecting, the teacher can enhance and make new ways and strategies. After assessment and reflection, you will once again identify the next learning goals and so the cycle continues. For example, Teacher Chris later on gave a multiplication quiz. 90% of the students passed. She planned to give remedial exercises to those failed. This teaching cycle taught Teacher Chris that students can discover concepts on their own. However, they must still be guided by a teacher because misconceptions may arise. So those are the stages of teaching cycle.